Previously on Clash Course. Greg, here's a really good point. No, Joey, I'm really dumb. My name's Greg, I'm an atheist. Well, did you think about this? Oh, you got me on that one. Oh, I'm dead. So that's what happened. That's what happened last week. Sean Deshawn didn't make a previously on Clash Course this week, so I figured I would make a more accurate version.
You think we can do it with sock puppets?
We can. In fact, we made some sock puppets for T-Bog. Matt is running to get them. It was a joke, Matt. All right. Welcome to Clash Course. My name is Joey Livingston, and my co-host is Greg Brahe. Clash Course is a show where atheists and theists alike argue. Myself and Greg are simply placeholders, though no one has yet to take our place. That is what we're here for. We are here for you to come in and argue with one of us, or if you'd like to argue with someone else, you might even be able to come on and have an argument with somebody else right here on this platform. But we are here to, Greg and I are the exemplary example of what civilized arguments should be about, right? Right, Greg?
Right. Well, I am.
I cannot hear Greg on the monitor anymore. Can we fix that?
Is this
okay?
Is this
No.
fault?
It's us. All right, thank you. So, Greg, last week we wrapped up our little conversation about polygamy versus monogamy, and I conceded that I had not made a strong enough argument to win that free and clear. There are some arguments where I feel like I have really won big time, but that wasn't one of them. How did you feel about last week?
I have to agree. I don't think that either of us has made a really clear and strong case for one or the other position over the other person. But
how come
once again, I always take the default, which means that unless you can prove you're right, I win. So
that's pretty convenient,
isn't it? I like it. When you make the affirmative claim, it makes my life way easier.
I'm starting to realize that this whole atheist thing is just one big scam.
Right. That's the same reason I do it for atheism, because I
Yeah.
win against every religion that can't prove that they're right.
That's cheating. So this week we're going to discuss the other side of this argument, because we agreed at the beginning that we were going to separate the ogamies from the amories. And I'm not even going to try to define that, except that, well, Greg and I have both kind of agreed that ogamy has more to do with the sexual aspect, and amory has more to do with the friendship aspect. Correct?
Correct.
Okay, so this week we're going to explore the
romantic love aspect, I'd say, then.
Okay, this week we're going to talk about that. This week we're going to explore the amory part of it. So I think that's a good place to start. Tell me, last week we talked about the sexual aspect of these relationships. And this week we were going to discuss more the friendship aspect, but you're telling me that it also has to do with romance. You said love, but friendship is also love.
Right.
So,
the romantic love, I'd say, is a type of love.
Okay. Now, the romance part of it leads to
They're intertwined, certainly.
It
doesn't necessarily. There are plenty of romantic relationships that never include sex.
Really?
I would certainly say so. I mean, it's well documented through history and other sources. I don't have any sources to cite here with me, but there have certainly been sexless relationships that have been extremely romantic over time for a variety of reasons.
Give me an example.
Well, we can go with somebody incapable of having sexual intercourse.
That is an example of somebody who can't have sex, not somebody who doesn't want to. Now, I understand that I was a little unclear. yes, they don't. I can see what you're saying. They don't always lead to sex, but that doesn't mean that it is not that is not the intention or the thing that exists in the mind.
I agree. I would say that that is the qualifier that classifies the difference between romantic love and friendship.
Okay, so
Is the desire for.
So I'm
a
going to
love.
argue that if you are engaging in an act that is intended to lead to sexual issues, whether it be physically or within the mind, because you cannot engage physically, that is not a part of the friendship aspect. That is back over in monogamy or polygamy, because we are now talking about people who are either having sex or trying to lead it in that direction.
Okay. I'm happy to argue that we can have more than one friend.
Right. Okay. Now, great. I'm glad that I have you there, because that is where I want to completely separate sex from this. We can go back and rehash polygamy and monogamy, because we never actually discussed the mating process or the courting process, which I think is what
we intentionally tried to separate the two so that we could intertwine them afterward, and I think that that's going to have to come
right.
about pretty quickly.
So perhaps that's the in-between.
Right.
Okay.
I'd say that that's actually the truer to life application of the terms that we're discussing in the first place.
Okay.
Separating the two is more of a.
But in my opinion, it is a. There are shades of gray that lead from friendship to sex, but in terms of intention, it is quite literally a light switch. Either you are dialoguing with a person or engaging with a person with intentions of going towards the sexual, whether it is a conscious intention or not, or you are purely dialoguing with them for purposes of friendship. That there is a gradient there, but the beginning of it is black or white.
I think that that's an unfair position to take on the subject, given that there is obviously going to be we sort of need to look at it as the fallacy of the heap. At some point, there will be a transition in any platonic relationship that becomes an intimate relationship.
I agree.
Or a sexual relationship. But we won't necessarily be aware of when that happens.
That is what I just said.
That may not necessarily be the goal.
That's what I just said.
But you said it was like a light switch. I'm saying that.
I said whether you're aware of it or not.
There will be a switch.
There is a gradient at which you become more. There can be a gradient at which you become more and more aware. But somewhere in your subconscious, that switch happens, and you may not be aware of when it happens. Did I lose you?
You did for a moment, but
okay. I said there certainly can be a gradient at which you are aware of your feelings and your intentions, but at some point, going from the platonic to the non-platonic is quite a light switch on a subconscious level, at least a subconscious level, if not a conscious level.
I'd have to agree. There certainly would be a transition, I think, by definition here.
No, I said yes. There can be a gradient in terms of your awareness, but what I said about the transition from platonic to non-platonic is that it is not gradient. Whether even at least on a subconscious level, if not on a conscious level.
Well, I mean, I have to agree, because there would certainly be at some point I mean, we're almost talking about. The reason that calculus was invented is if it might be approaching that point, but not quite there yet. At some point, it will be there, and that can be considered a non-gradient switching point. That's, say, the center of the gradient. I mean, at what point it does.
But you're describing quite the opposite.
I think it happens at purple.
You're describing quite the opposite of what I'm saying here. You're saying that there's a gradient that leads up to it, and then you're there. I'm saying from the platonic to the non-platonic, it starts as you are there. It is only about how far you are there, and then from there, it's a gradient. I mean, we cannot I mean, it is it is always a gradient in terms of from the romantic courting to the sexual. That is always a gradient. But in terms of intentions, whether subconscious or conscious, that switch from platonic to non-platonic is just like that. I mean, it's not. There's no gradient there. It is a perhaps a inception or a conception that is not there one moment and there the next. It may be from there it's a gradient, but that moment is a switch.
Joey, I mean, I have to say that I think you're defining this into a way that I couldn't argue with it by saying that we wouldn't necessarily be aware of that switch. I think that awareness is a key part of intent, and we can't necessarily be acting with intent if we're not aware of that intent. So
let me be clear about what I'm trying to do. I'm not. I mean, maybe I'm painting you into a box, but I don't think that. I think maybe you're thinking that I'm being a little more devious than I am. All I'm doing is I'm trying to be very organized in taking all matters that are romantic and sexual and putting them aside. Okay, because here's the deal. When people talk about polygamy and monogamy and polyamory and monoamory, let me state it this way. For a while, at least in the mass consciousness, this issue was discussed almost purely in terms of monogamy and polygamy. Don't you think?
Yes.
Okay.
Let me I think go into why I'm preemptively disagreeing, because that might clarify where the conflict is coming from here. Is that there are plenty of romantic relationships that did not begin with the intention of romance. Obviously,
Sure.
There's plenty that did. People who went on a date after meeting in some sort of love at first sight. But there's plenty of people who started out as good friends, and
Certainly.
over any amount of time, even many, many years, this developed into more than a friendship. And
Certainly.
I think if you ask either of them when that happened, it's going to be a very, very difficult
Unknown.
thing for them.
I agree.
To
I'm not
pin
saying
down. And
I'm not saying
that's
that
what
moment.
I'm trying to discuss.
I'm not saying that moment is not. I'm not saying that moment is always known, and I'm not saying that the same two people can't go from one to the other. I'm not saying either of those things. What I'm really struggling for here, as I said, for a long time in the public consciousness, this issue was talked about in terms of monogamy and polygamy. That is the sexual. Then some very smart people came along and they began to dialogue in terms of monoamory and polyamory, and there was some value to this. But what I don't agree with that I'm hearing is that as this issue is discussed in terms of the amories, it feels like people are trying to focus more on the friendship and not the sexual, and so. But they still act like there's somewhere in between that is beyond friendship, and what I'm laboring for here is that if you are talking about the in between, you are still talking about the sexual.
I can't necessarily grant that. I'm willing to provisionally grant it to see where you're going to go forward with it, but I'd like to reserve the right to come back to this point.
We just spent a long time. We just spent not a long time, but a few minutes talking about this. And in this entire time, although you did not agree to the light switch at the beginning, you certainly did agree that the gradient in between was always intended to lead to the sexual, whether that be physical sex or non-physical sex, because physical sex was not possible. That the intent and the desire was always leading towards sex to some degree or another.
No, I did not agree to that. I
thought that's
agree
what you're
that there
saying.
is a gradient, but that is in a descriptive, not a proscriptive sense, that any relationship that goes from friendship to a romantic sexual relationship will certainly have that gradient. It's not something that happens overnight, but not all relationships make that transition, and not all relationships that begin that transition and develop any sort of sexual desire or romantic desire maintain that direction. It's something that there certainly can be reverses in course, or it's a very nuanced landscape. That
But
is
just
far
because
more
you reverse the
two-dimensional.
course doesn't mean that that your intention wasn't sexual before you reversed it. Give me an example of a relationship that is either romantic or more than friendship, and if more than friendship, tell me what you mean besides romance, in which the intention or desire does not have to do with sex.
Well, let me give you a slightly different question, and I'm going to apologize because I'm going to go a little personal on this one. If you could never have sex with your wife again, would you remarry, or would you remain married to her and maintain your loving lifestyle as it is as a monogamous couple?
Okay, so you are what you're trying to get at here is to show me that I could have a monoamorous relationship with my wife without having any sexual desire, right?
Yes.
Okay, which I totally agree with. But that is friendship.
Is it?
It is, and we'll talk more about that in a moment. But what I'm trying to do before we continue is to completely separate sex and friendship. And if you think if you think that there is a gradient in between that is not sexual, then I want you to give me an example of a romantic or more than friendship relationship where the intention is not sexual.
Well, I think that it's difficult for me to come up with an example in this, but I can come up with an example that would demonstrate why that's not particularly relevant. Because I would say when we're talking about friendship, that monoamory doesn't even make sense as a term. I can't come up with any situation in which any friendship is expected to be exclusive.
Okay, let me tell you one more thing so that you can kind of understand where I'm going here. Okay, what I want to argue in this argument is that, first of all, I'm being asked to take the position of polyamory versus monoamory, and I agree that is not a realistic position to take. Okay, but I didn't actually say when I began this that I was going to argue this versus that. I simply was going to argue that this is better. One is
That's
better
true.
than the other. Now, when it comes to polyamory versus monoamory, I believe that we are talking completely in both cases about friendship. And if I am right, if I'm wrong, I want to be shown that. But if I'm right, then what I am going to argue is that monoamory exists almost always, and that it always exists within polyamory when it does exist. Except in the case
monoamory exists
except in the case of weirdo hermits, monoamory, when it exists, will almost always exist within polyamory. In other words, monoamory is intense friendship between two people, and polyamory is when a lot of people are friends.
I'm going to have to disagree with your choice of definition in that respect. I think that's where the confusion is coming from. I see the distinction between monoamory and polyamory and monogamy and polygamy both to be not associated with behaviors per se, and more associated with expectations or within those involved. I'd say that the defining characteristic, as I said, not all polygamous couples are successful. I'd imagine not all, or polygamous groups, individuals, are successful in having multiple partners. I'd imagine the same is true about polyamorous people, but I'm going to argue that if we remove the sexual side of it and define the mono and polyamory as friendship, I don't think there is such a thing as monoamory, because my definition of the two is an expectation of exclusivity between the partners, where a monogamous couple expects their partner to not have sex with other partners. Mm-hmm. And the same expectation is true on them. So if we're going to define this as friendship between two individuals, as monoamory, I cannot come up with a single example of any friendship where one partner expects their other partner to not have any friends or any other friends, and vice versa.
Okay, but I don't think that what you're saying can be possible there, and because I still look at them both as we are now talking about the friendship aspect. Now, if we are not, then do this for me. You said a moment ago that monogamy and polygamy deal with the sexual relationship of people, correct?
Yes.
Okay. Now let's get specific here. Monoamory and polyamory deal with the blank relationship of people. What is blank?
Romantic or social. It's. I think you're
Okay.
arguing for the social. I'm arguing for romantic.
I can see the social. Now, show me how the romantic does not lead to sex.
I'm not saying that it doesn't lead to sex. I'm saying that even if it doesn't lead to sex, it is a. I think that it'd be unreasonable for us to treat this as if due to common language or language restrictions, we may not be able to use the words, but I think most people recognize that there's different kinds of love. The love that a parent has for the child is not the same kind of love that they felt for the person that they were producing that child with. And it's not the same kind of love that they have for their buddy from college either. There's different ways we experience love. And I'm arguing that romantic love is a kind of love. It's related to attraction and desires. There's actually quite a bit of writing by polyamorous authors on this subject, including things like the term NRE, is new relationship energy. When you meet a new person and you find them extremely interesting and enthralling in so many ways that all you want to do is learn about them and talk about them. And I don't think any of us can say that there was, when we see things on sitcoms where it's, no, you hang up, no, you hang up, and the silly 6-hour phone conversations where you don't even remember what you talked about, just we're so happy to be talking to the other person. The part where you find each other so interesting you can't leave each other go. I think that is a romantic manifestation of love.
So
That is outside of the sexual realm.
So you're saying that polyamory is where a bunch of people, 3 to 5 or more, we'll just deal with 3 to 5, are all being romantic towards one another.
Well, I'm saying that where there is no expectation of exclusivity in romantic behavior.
Okay. Well, dating, is that polyamory?
I guess I'd need a better description of what you mean by dating.
Where
Do you mean,
where
like,
people
when
are going out with one another to find a partner.
I think it depends on the usage that those individuals do. I know that it's pretty common. See, I started dating my wife in high school. When you start dating, you're a couple, and there's an expectation of monogamy in almost every situation.
Okay. So not polyamory, because most of the time the expectation of dating is to eventually find a single one.
That's true. There's also, though, the distinction that a lot of my friends made as they got older, and I was already in a committed relationship, was seeing somebody versus dating somebody. Seeing people, you can see multiple people at once, sort of be going on dates, getting to know a handful of people until, in many cases, they find the one that they want to be monogamous with in that respect, because they are inclined towards monogamy. I would say that the difference monoamory. I'd say that the difference between monoamory and polyamory is that there's no expectation that is going to be narrowed down to a single choice in the future by either party.
Okay. So again, 3 or more people all being romantic towards one another with no expectation of exclusive romance ever. Okay, I think we may have finally lost Gregory here. His resolution is going downhill by the moment. Gregory, are you there?
I can still hear you.
Greg, you can still hear me?
I can hear you.
I can hear you now. I'll tell you what. Until let's turn his video off for a few moments and let's just have his audio. Can you turn your camera off, Greg?
I can try. It might be my computer actually that's slowing her down here.
Literally just a button. Just find the camera button and just
Okay, I found
click
it.
it. All right, very good. Okay, so I'm gonna back up to where I remember we were before that happened. Polyamory: 3 or more people being romantic towards one another with no expectation of exclusivity between anyone ever. Is that?
Yes.
That's what
that
you're
would
saying.
be correct.
Okay. All right. Romance. And you're talking about romance that may never, that they're not trying to get in each other's britches.
Right. Whether they are trying to or not is irrelevant.
But they might not be. They might not be.
Correct.
Then why are they doing it?
I don't know. Well, let me ask you this. It might be better to explain this by, again, the expectation of monoamory in the feelings of the significant other or other individuals involved with it. In marriages and relationships, there is jealousy. That happens sometimes because they believe there is a sexual infidelity or a desire for sexual infidelity. Other times it's just because there's competition for time and affection. And things that happen even sometimes between people get jealous of work, of their,
Sure.
to use some cliches here, their husband's job for drawing too much time away from them.
Yeah.
I can see certainly the same thing would be related to an additional friend or companion, and that's one of the motivators for monoamory in that respect, is to avoid that jealousy. In a contrast, in polyamory, there's a term that's used called, it's compersion, which would be the opposite of jealousy, a positive feeling related to your significant other or others being in a new relationship or finding a new partner.
Okay. See, I asked you a moment ago, why romance if they're not trying to get into each other's britches? And you said, I don't know. That's a fair answer. If you don't know, that's fine. But this is where I am. I don't know what exists within the amories that are not of sexual nature, that are more than friendship. I understand that there is a transition between having sex and being platonic, but that transition is leading to sex. And I can certainly find separation there in which some people would want to do that with only one, and some people would want to do that with only many. But aside from that, it's all friendship. And that, in my mind, you haven't given me an example of what romance or courtship would be that where the intention is not on some level sex. So what if you don't know?
It's a very difficult thing to describe.
It certainly
and I think
is.
it's a difficult thing because it is very unlikely to exist entirely apart from one another. But I think anybody who's ever watched a romantic comedy has seen the very, once again, the cliche trope of the two best friends that have been relationship after relationship with other people and just never realized that they were perfect for each other. And then some major event comes about that makes them go, oh, I've been in love with you this whole time, and just never realized it.
Right.
We've been the perfect.
There are two things going on there.
Whatever it may be.
There are two things going on in that moment. The first thing is that they realize that this person is the perfect friend, that they fit together like a glove. The second thing that happens is their hormones fire up and they say, I'd like to have sex with this person. Those two things are happening. Is there anything else happening there that I'm missing?
I don't know. I think we might be best served by, again, just provisionally sort of granting this point and moving on. Because I feel like we
have moved on, because I didn't ask you to I kind of pressed for you to agree with that, but you wouldn't. So I just started working in this idea of friendship. Now we can go ahead and move on, but where I am once we move on is saying that amory is all friendship. And if it is all friendship, then there is no monoamory that exists without polyamory. Let's just start talking about friendship for a moment.
Wait, I'm sorry, that exists without polyamory?
Yes, all monoamory, except for maybe hermits that have a partner, exist within polyamory. In other
So you're
words,
saying that monoamory is a subset of polyamory?
yes.
Okay, I won't even argue against that one.
Yeah, well, I mean, if we are talking about just friendship, then what that means is that we all have lots of friends, and most people have a favorite friend, and we want to be a favorite friend.
Right. So you're saying that there's such a thing as a best friend, that the closest friend.
Right.
In that respect.
Yes.
Sure.
And
I won't argue that that is common and frequent. I won't say that that is a necessary condition. Or, once again, the expectation of exclusivity is a universal trait. I have multiple people that I would describe as my best friend, because they've all been so close to me over such a long period of time that I couldn't rank one over the other in any way. But
yes.
I also know that they'd never want me to, and that they don't have any expectation that I am only best friends with them.
Okay.
And I think that that's the difference that we would have to qualify into anything that we're to define as monoamory as an expectation of exclusivity. Because
Okay.
that would be the equivalent to monogamy.
Okay, but let me ask you a question. You say you have lots of best friends. Are those best friends better friends with you than your wife is?
Maybe. It depends. I mean, it depends on what aspects of our friendship you're looking at.
Overall.
They may know me. They may know different aspects of my personality to a deeper degree in one
Certainly.
way than she does, and she might know the other. This is why my wife is one of the people that I would include in that category.
Certainly.
But I can't say that my wife is my very best friend that knows me better than anyone, and I know her better than anyone, because frankly, I mean, I met my wife when we were 16. I've had friends that I know as long as I can remember, and
Okay.
have been extremely close.
All right. So I would argue, and don't take this personally. It's just my opinion of your situation, that you are not in a monoamorous relationship. That is what I mean by that term. Now, other people might mean something different, but I really want to know what they mean, because what is this beyond friendship that is not the sexual?
Well, but I think that you're approaching it in a descriptive sense, and I'm only saying that the terms make sense in a proscriptive way.
You're going to have to
You're
help me
saying
understand that. I'm too stupid to understand what you're saying.
You're saying that people should be monogamous or monoamorous, that it's better than polyamory or polygamy.
No,
I'm saying that. Well, I mean, that was the.
Yes,
the
I
position
am,
you
but
were
that's
taking.
not what I'm saying right now. I'm asking a question. What is?
But the reason that I'm making this distinction is because in a descriptive sense, you can look and retroactively label anything that you want as, well, that wasn't a polygamous relationship, or that wasn't a polyamorous relationship. I think that for something to be a true polyamorous relationship, there has to be an expectation within that relationship that it maintains that type of status as long as it is together, or until it makes a willful and voluntary sort of a meta-analysis of itself to make a transition into a poly environment.
And I'm asking.
The same thing is with monogamy versus monoamory, is that if you have a best friend, that doesn't mean that it is monoamorous in the usage that I'm intending, because that is just saying that that person is your closest friend right now. It doesn't mean that they expect to always be, or they would in some way stop being your friend if you were to develop another very close friendship.
But we agreed from the beginning that neither type of relationship, let me restate that both types of relationships may or may not last forever, for the rest of your life.
No, that's true. We did agree that, but I think that the intent is what we need to consider in this, is that if theoretically the relationship did last forever, is there the intrinsic expectation within that relationship that it will maintain the same status of exclusivity or non-exclusivity. I think that that is the key marker between mono and poly in either category. That if you only expect your partner to be with you, then that means that is mono.
So you're saying, go ahead. Go ahead, sorry.
I was saying if you only expect your partner to be with you as long as your relationship maintains over time, then that is a mono relationship. If you don't have any expectation of exclusivity, either in this very close friendship or sexual manner, then that is a poly relationship. Okay. For the time in which it survives.
So you're saying, so for example, monoamorous would be a relationship where two people decide that they're going to be best friends forever, BFFs. Okay.
Yes, and would end the relationship if there were somebody who were challenging or somebody challenging and usurping that position would be an issue. Yes.
Okay. And monoamorous relationships are where three or more people have decided that they're all equally BFFs.
Well, polyamorous, yes.
Okay. Sorry. Polyamorous. So yes, they've all agreed and decided that they will always be equally BFFs.
Well, I'm not even saying it doesn't have to do with the number of people. You can have a polyamorous two-person relationship, is what I'm saying. Because a polyamory, much like polygamy, is not about the current conditions, but about the expectations for what the future will hold. Because I think that it's more evident in polygamy. Okay. If you have somebody that it's easier to explain, I guess, using polygamy.
I guess the question...
If you have a sexual relationship with somebody that you expect, as long as you are having a sexual relationship, only the two of you having sexual relations with each other. And if they want to have sexual relations with another person, they need to stop having sexual relations with you, is the sort of definition of monogamy as I see it. Poly or monoamory then would be the same applied to a friendship.
Okay.
That is the expectation of only the two of
if we're just talking about friendship, then what is being said here is, two other people or three other people, we're going to agree to be, now, I want to clarify why I'm saying this. I want some clarity about what amory means. Are we saying that those three or four people are friends and they are friends with no one else, or that they are just best friends and not best friends with anybody else?
I guess either way you want to qualify it is a fair distinction. If you want to call it a level of friendship, then we can do that. Or friendship at all, it's really
there's obviously a gradient between friendships, number one. Number two, within polyamorous relationships, I would ask how often the agreement that you're setting up is realistic. They might say this is how it is, but I would venture to say that in most cases, every single one of those people would have a favorite, if not on a conscious level, certainly on an unconscious one. Might not always happen, but probably.
Well, it might be true that there is a favorite at any given moment, but that doesn't necessarily mean that the favorite place is something that is, once again, it's about expectations for the future. The favorite place is something that is expected to be held to perpetuity and can't be bounced around multiple partners, can't be given to a new partner for a time until they, once again, the terms compersion and new relationship energy apply very strongly to this.
Let's replace partner with friend.
Right. I'm using partner in a friendship sense in this way. That it's an exclusive friendship.
Yeah, but I think it makes way less. If you say partner, it makes more sense but only because there's a little bit of an implication of sex and romance. If you say friend and replace the word partner with friend, as you say what you're saying, I don't think it makes any sense at all because number one, within polyamory, yes, you may have a favorite at this point or another, or you may always have a favorite, and just not say it out loud. And also within polyamory, if two or three or four or five people agree that they're BFFs forever, they're going to have friends outside of that relationship unless they're just weird. I
agree. I'm actually the argument that I'm making here. It may seem silly. I'm sorry. I'm going to move my computer just a little bit because the sun's shining on it. It's getting really hot. The argument that I'm making is that the distinction of monoamory, if we're treating it only as friendship, is a silly one because I don't know of any friendships that truly hold that place. Now, I think when we were in middle school, there was probably a lot more of that, where if somebody was your best friend, they had a pretty clear expectation that you sort of don't go friending around with other people. It was insulting. The BFFs thing takes on a much
No.
greater role.
That's not what I mean by best. That's not what I mean by best. I agree that there is a childish sort of best friend where, oh, you're not going to be friends with anybody else. What I mean, let's talk about the word best for a second in this context. What I mean is the person who knows you best overall, and you know them best overall, and you spend the most time around them, and they spend the most time around you, and you guys are, you're satisfied with the time that you spend, maybe, and you get tired of them the least.
Well, I think you actually just hit the nail right on the head for me there, Joey, by saying that it's a childish thing. That there is this possession that comes around. Oh, well, I'm getting to my point here. That is what I am talking about when I'm talking about the mono aspect, is the expectation of exclusivity between people. That's, I think, the distinction that you and I are hitching on, is you're looking at it as a description of behavior among people in groups, in sort of an anthropological sense. I'm looking at it in a philosophical sense about what these people think their relationship should be. That a monogamous relationship is an expectation that your relationship, your sexual relationship, as long as it may last, is exclusive and mutually exclusive on both ends. Polygamy is not defined in the same manner. Okay. And polyamory versus monoamory, I think monoamory would best be described, if we're going to do an analogy, as that middle school type of possessive best friendship.
Okay. Well, first of all, you just attacked the thing that I said I wasn't talking about. So congratulations on that.
I'm saying that's what I am talking about.
Okay, but then you're not attacking my argument. Okay, I understand what you're talking about, but now, and I agree that's stupid. Let's throw it out the door. Second of all, I do agree with you. I've been really struggling to understand what you had meant by saying that I'm taking a descriptive approach. Now I think I do, and I think I agree with you. I am talking about the way things actually are. And you are talking about people who are trying to they have a philosophy about the way they think things should be, and I am saying that there's nothing realistic about it.
I think if that's the case, then actually we may have agreed the whole time and not had a clear understanding from the beginning what we meant by it. But I think that you have the more idiosyncratic definition of the terms mono and poly.
I see you've been hanging out with Mowdy.
Right.
By the way, he apologized for calling me idiosyncratic. He said it was being snarky, so watch your tone or I will accuse you of the same thing.
I think it is a very good term to use it, because I think that it's nuanced and unique in the way that you're using it, not common by what most people who would use those terms would understand them to be. Now, monoamory is a term that we've sort of almost made up, because I've never seen that described in any other
Well, it's implied.
That's true, but I think that in the general cultural usages, monogamy and polygamy refer to, two levels. One is about marriage, the other one is about sexual relationships. Monogamy generally refers to the sexual relationship in any context. Polygamy is typically applied to marriage, but I think obviously can be extended outside of marriage into any non-monogamous relationship, sexually speaking. Whereas polyamory is generally thought of as more of a subset of polygamy in a real behavior or real behavioral sense. Those who would identify themselves as polyamorous would also, sort of by definition, be polygamist, because they don't look at the possessive side of of relationships as a legitimate side, and they extend that to the sexual relationships.
Okay. Before I continue, I just want to make sure that my earlier comment was understood. I don't want to be thought of as throwing that Mowdy's apology in his face. He was very kind after that discussion Wednesday, and he came to me and he was very graceful, and he said, "I'm sorry if I came off snarky," but I thought it was, I was fine with it in the conversation, and one day I'll probably give him a smackdown as well. But you're calling me idiosyncratic in saying that I'm using some sort of unconventional definition. What I think I'm doing is I'm really trying to get to the bottom of what it means, because you haven't given me a definition that means more than friendship, unless I'm just being thick. Whenever I ask you to tell me what it means beyond friendship, you struggle and you come to a place where you're talking about something that is certainly romance or courtship, which in my opinion is in the sexual category.
Well, and that's why I said, that's what I meant when I talked about sort of moving forward on this one, is that I think it's sort of, it has been revealed that the pure and non-sexual terminology behind monoamory and polyamory is silly and doesn't really apply to the real world. I'd say that polyamory is best understood in the context of a subset of polygamy.
I totally agree. Okay, I think we do agree, but I don't think everybody agrees with you or I on this issue, because what I have really struggled for in this discussion is to say, when we talk about polyamory and monoamory, we are talking about friendship, and it all exists. You have best friends, you have favorite friends, you have super close friends, you have lots of friends. All of that stuff exists. It coexists, and it's fine. When you cross the line and you go into the area of what we traditionally view as marriage or sexual relationships, that is when you get into an area where it is hotly debatable as to whether it's acceptable for that to be beyond more than two people. The friendship part of it is to me when you talk about the amories of it, polyamory. Just talk about polyamory. You say that it needs to exist within polygamy. Okay, so I'm saying let's stop talking about it as if it's something that's more than sex, because it is when you cross into the sexual that it becomes real iffy. When it's not sexual, it's just friendship. You have intense friendship and other friendships, but until it becomes sexual, you're not talking about anything more than just friendship, and all that's fine.
I would agree and I would disagree. That
then help me.
I think if you talk to any monogamous relationship or any monogamous couple, there's actually a greater distinction put on the amory side. When we understand amory as a romantic sort of love, a love with some sort of sexual desire versus sexual desire alone. And that's, I think, the distinction that I intended to make by going monoamory, is that I think that polygamy is actually the easier argument to make for why it shouldn't be disallowed. But your argument that it is a better thing to be monogamous is an easier argument to make as well, because when we're talking exclusively about sexuality, then health is really the only thing that's involved. It's only when we involve emotions into the process that it really sort of muddies the water. And I think that most monogamous relationships, if you were to ask any married couple which they would feel was a greater betrayal, would be a single sexual action with, say, a coworker or a random stranger when, bad decisions were being in some sort of extenuating circumstance where they actually had intercourse. Feel like less of a betrayal to people who are inclined toward monogamy than a person with a long-standing romantic emotional relationship with a friend or coworker that never even made it to the sexual level, but there was desire to do or to be there.
You're saying
that's what I mean.
The sexual transgression would hurt more?
I'm saying that the sexual transgression in the context of most relationships would actually hurt less. It would feel like less of a betrayal
Okay.
to the
Now,
couple.
I see what you're saying, and I think that's a very interesting argument. Now, where I am in my life is my wife is my best friend, and we have a relationship on a friendship level that is that is on a whole different level than any of my other friends. We love to spend time with each other. We love to get to know each other more and more every day. It is certainly beyond the sexual. I believe that a good monogamous relationship has both the sexual the sexual exclusivity and a friendship that is on a much higher level than any of your other friends. But I'm not arguing that that for a successful monogamous relationship you can be intense friends with lots of people. But I'm saying that within friendship, everyone will almost always gravitate towards one person, if not their entire life, at least for a single moment in their life. And I think that that as you grow in life, as you become more and more mature, you begin to realize that investing your life with a person and building a friendship that transcends the understanding of the people around you, that you know this person on a whole different level. First of all, you cannot have a friendship that intense and that deep with 5 people like you can with one, and that is special and is the foundation of a successful monogamous or monoamorous relationship. But the sexual is also exclusive. That is a successful monogamous monoamorous relationship, and I think that it is for that reason that it is better overall. But I am not going to argue that you cannot have more than one friend. We're out of time. Do you want to have some closing comment before we end the show?
Yeah, I wanted to say that I agree with a lot of what you said in the descriptive sense once again. But I think that you're arguing that this is what people should want, that it is better, and therefore I would say in a philosophical sense it would be that it is what people should want if it is better. And that's where I am having the dilemma here.
Well, whether they should want it or not, it is better.
And that's where I think I made it very clear in the first show that we did 2 weeks ago about this, that my objection was in the normative sense. That was my very first clarification that we made, is that in a proscriptive sense, in a normative sense, it doesn't make sense, or it's not a best policy. Now, if you wanted to say it's best as a descriptive thing, that it tends to agree with that. Even just if we look at general numbers, I think polyamory is a pretty small subset of the population.
So in terms of what is realistic, you agree with me?
I think that for most individuals that may very well be true, but it also could be very strongly related to the culture that we grew up in, and many, the archetypes that we see. I mean, there's all kinds of variables that might be associated with that. What I'm saying is that the concept of monogamy as a proscriptive, something that should be done, is not a superior concept. And let me clarify with this. I'm going to close out with just a real short personal thing. Since you said that your wife is your best friend, your closest friend, you know more about her than anybody else, and she you, and you are perfectly happy that way. And I can say the same exact thing is true of my wife and myself. That
Thank you.
We know each other to an extremely deep level, and we have this emotional bond that cannot be described, and that has always been the case, and it's grown stronger with time. But
That's great.
Is not the only time I've experienced that within our relationship.
That's not the only time you've experienced that within your relationship with her.
No. During the chronological period of my relationship with her, that is not the only time I've experienced that feeling.
Okay. We are way out of time. We're way over time, so we're going to close. I'm going to close with a snarky comment here, and that is to say, Greg wins on the level where it is not realistic. So his show is up next with Inspiring Honesty. Congratulations, Greg, on your unrealistic victory. We'll see you next week on Clash Course, where I do want to continue this. I think that we've gotten to a level that's very interesting. And thanks for letting me be snarky. We'll see you next week.